Manon Firo versus Tabitha Richie, and we have no odds for this fight, as this fight has actually not even been announced yet. I'm lucky enough to have a couple sources that are able to let me know that this fight is actually going to be happening, and that Morose is unfortunately having to pull out of this fight. But I wanted to get ahead of the game a little bit and make sure I had this breakdown ready to go for once the announcement did drop, that I can drop this breakdown for you guys so that we can at least get an idea of what we're getting ourselves into with this short notice opponent in Tabitha Richie. So what do we know about Ricci? Her last three fights were in the LFA, most recently on April 23rd, where she was able to defeat Shauna Ormsby by TKO at the ending of the second round. And in terms of her credentials, she's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, black belt in judo, and it seems like her game is pretty much predicated on grounding her opponents and then eventually just grinding them out, finding a submission, or getting the TKO like she did in her last fight. She's kind of undersized here. She's coming up a weight class up to flyweight to take this fight on short notice, but normally she's a strawweight, and she's 5'1" with a 62-inch reach compared to the Manon Firo side of things, where she's 5'7" with a 66-inch reach. So we're going to see a decided advantage in terms of size here for Firo, and I think it's going to translate over to the strength as well, as I think that Ricci will struggle to get Firo to the ground here. Now, in terms of her striking style, Ricci seems to have a buzzsaw type of style, which is just kind of cut forward with an aggressive striking style, very wide winging shots, nothing really down the middle, and it's pretty much just there to go to ground a fight, right? To close the distance, to get her opponent clinched up against the cage, and then she tries inside trips, some head and arm throws, whatever is possible to try to get the fight to the ground, where she should more often than not have an advantage over her opponents. Obviously, I think that Ricci does have the grappling advantage in this fight against Manon Firo, but Firo has shown some good things in her past couple fights that are showing that she is far removed from that just a kickboxing Muay Thai fighter that she was before coming into the MMA game. Fiorot only has that one loss on her record to Leah McCord, where she was I don't want to say grinded out, but she did give up some grappling positions, and we did see McCord land some takedowns in that fight and was able to win it just off of grappling and controlling alone. But it was a split decision, and I'm glad that one judge did actually score some good damage that Fiorot was able to land, especially when she was able to get back to her feet, and Leah McCord just kind of seemed lost in the striking exchanges. I think that Fiorot, being the bigger fighter here and the more well-rounded striker, the better technical striker, is going to bode well for her, especially in terms of keeping the range and keeping Ricci on the outside. Again, you got a 6-inch height advantage as well as a 4-inch reach advantage. I think that we'll see Fiorot absolutely maximize that and get her striking game going and really hurt Ricci here. Ricci, again, she seems like she needs to get her shit together in terms of her striking. Again, it's a little bit too wild. It's a little bit too aggressive for me in terms of, it just seems like she does it to close the distance to get the fight to the ground. She is a solid jiu-jitsu player, like I said, a black belt in jiu-jitsu. She has a ton of national titles that she won down there in Brazil, but I think she's going to struggle in terms of getting this fight to the ground, which will not allow her to really shine in that grappling realm. Again, I think the size difference is going to be a little bit too much here. Again, no odds yet. I'm kind of thinking that we're going to get Fiorot probably around minus 200, minus 250. I'm going to say closer to that minus 200 range. If we get anything better than that, I think I'll take a little bit of a stab here on Fiorot. And not to mention, I think that Fiorot is live to actually get a finish too, as she's a very aggressive striker, and I don't think that Ricci will react well to being hit by Fiorot. Also, let's take into consideration that Tabitha Richie is taking a massive step up in competition. She was a minus 2,500 favorite in her last fight, and it took to the ending of the second round for her to dispose of her opponent. But her last, in 5 of her wins, all 5 of her wins, her opponents have had very abysmal records. I believe the accumulative record of all these, the combined record of all of her opponents is 4-10. So very low level that she's been going up against. She's been able to buzzsaw through a lot of her opponents, but I think she's going to have a rude awakening going up against a Manon Firo and not being able to, ground the fight as easily as she's been able to do in the past. So I think that we'll see Firo maintain the distance, land her strikes from distance, and then eventually start to open up when she starts to see, Ricci starting to fade. And I do think that we'll see Firo be very successful in terms of landing combinations, putting that power on her, and then eventually getting her out of there at the ending of that second, probably closer to the middle of this fight. So I'm going to say second roundish. Excuse me. But yeah, I like Fiorot to win this fight. Again, very short notice nature for Tabitha Richie. It's going to be interesting to see how she pans out into the UFC once she gets a full training camp, and secondly, when she actually goes back down to her legitimate weight class, which is at 115 pounds in the strawweight division. So once again, I'll go with Manon Firo to win this fight via KO, and I think we'll see a huge discrepancy, especially when this fight is in the striking realm. So I'll go with Fiorot, second round KO.